Alright, welcome to This Week in Tyranny. Thank you for joining me. We're gonna get right into this episode about health. You might say, why are you doing an episode about health? You're not looking so healthy right about now. Well, that's the point. That's the point, and I'm gonna get into all of that. So if I'm coughing all over the place, it is what it is. No problem, though. We're gonna go right through it. First article I want to show you all of these articles I found this week, right? So this is all new information, or if it's old, it's still being refreshed. So it's very now, okay? This is stuff people are talking about now. So first we've got lung cancers in non-smokers. Many lung cancers are now in non-smokers. Scientists want to know why. This New York Times article. This is the 22nd of July, right? Annie Chan first noticed she was unusually short of breath in 2017 while coming to catch the bus home. So on and so forth. So this article follows her story. Her father was a heavy smoker, but she never smoked. So what's going on? Right? We're going to follow this story a little bit. But before I want to do that, I want to be absolutely clear with my point before I even get into it. It's such a firmly established fact that cigarette smoke causes lung cancer. We all know that, right? Which tells us the obvious, that inhaling toxic chemicals is going to give you lung cancer. So before I even read the article, before we even talk about what may be causing this, like very simple deduction that if more people are getting lung cancer despite not smoking cigarettes, then the obvious point, the obvious indication is they must be inhaling those toxic chemicals from other sources. They must be getting the equivalent of that cigarette smoke somewhere else, like the air. So we're going to talk about the toxicity of the air and stuff like that. The article says the disease's incidence and death rates have dropped over the last few decades, thanks largely to a decline in cigarette use. But lung cancers unrelated to smoking have persisted. So obviously people smoke less, but those cancers in non-smokers, they stay the same. So there's actually more of them now, right, comparatively. They say the thinking used to be that smoking was almost the only cause of lung cancer, said this doctor, right? But worldwide, roughly 10 to 25% of lung cancers now occur in people who have never smoked. Among certain groups of Asian and Asian American women, that share is estimated to be 50% or more. Those cancers are increasingly drawing the attention of researchers like Dr. Landy, who are studying the role of environmental exposure, genetic mutations, or other risk factors might play. They've already found some early hints, including a clear link to air pollution. So it's not a secret, right? They admit that it's air pollution. So let me tell you something about this. I'm not just pointing fingers indiscriminately here. Air pollution is not something that we are all responsible for. This isn't all humanity that's responsible for air pollution. On some level, all humans are responsible for everything that all humans do. Yes, right? On some level. But do I possess the ability, me, to affect the air? I don't. I can't affect the quality of air past a range of like 30 feet. Maybe 300 feet if I burn the whole building down and start a fire, right? But as far as affecting what's going on, I can't do that, me personally. Even if everybody on the block ran their cars, turned them on, and, we can't really... we're talking about a grand scale air pollution. Very, very big. So who does possess the resources and ability to affect the air quality on a mass level is the government. The government and military. The government with their military power. But not only them, of course, because the more likely and the more prevalent culprit of air pollution is large corporation, mass productions, big business, big machinery, big industry. We all know that. So when I say that, all the activists, all the progressives, the environmentalists, they're with me up until this point. We're saying the same thing. We're polluting the air. We need to stop with the air pollution. Where I lose them is when I say these companies are to blame, but the government is to blame as well. The companies cannot operate without government approval. They get government grants. There's a level of overlap between and cooperation between public and private control of resources. So public control of resources is government, politics, zoning, licensure, right? That's there, and then there's private control of resources, which is money, like literally having money. That controls the world, right? But it's not done by some kind of a established vested authority like a government. It's just if you got the money, you're in control. So banking, right? Literally capital, trade agreements, assets. That's still control of resources. So people got to understand there's public slavery and private slavery. There's like official control of resources and then there's unofficial control of resources. It's still the same system. There's an overlap between these systems. And a lot of people don't get that. I see many people operating under the illusion that these worlds are separate. They're not. They're the same world, just overlapping. And it's like if you try to take a corporation to court, right? They broke the law, they poisoned the neighborhood, and you see this happens a lot. And then what happens when you try to bring them to justice? They're going to use their influence, their money to prolong that legal process. They're going to make it dirty. They're going to make it drag out so long. They're going to make it so nasty that you will not be able to afford to see that legal process through to its completion. Because government has their back there. They're going to drag out that legal process and they're going to allow it. They're going to allow all of the objections, all of the injunctions, all of the motions to dismiss. Right? That's how that works. And when the banks failed, your government bailed them out with your taxpayer money. So to pay for their failures, their bad operating practices, all that stuff that caused the banks to fail in 2008, government had their back. They bailed them out. Now, you see this pattern, you want to do something about the government that keeps bailing them out, right? So you want to vote the politicians out like a lot of people want to do? No problem. You can vote them out. But you got lobbying. You got organizations like AIPAC that openly brags that 97% of the candidates that they donated money to, they ended up winning their election. Openly bragging, right, about that. That's the reality of lobbying. You could just bribe these motherfuckers. And you vote this guy out, but they'll just pay the next guy. So they know the game for real. It doesn't really matter who's in power because who's writing the checks. See, corporations have governments back too. So air pollution, that's one thing. And I'll come back to it too. The other thing they mentioned that I don't want to let go is genetic mutations, as it was mentioned in that article. But I'm going to leave that there for now and remember genetic mutations. But I'm going to go to another article, which is really a mirror of this one. So we saw a New York Times article about why people are getting lung cancer even though they're not smoking. Well, this is a BBC article titled The Mystery Rise of Lung Cancer in Non-Smokers. Very similar. This is June 6, 2025, right? So very recent. And here we go. The number of lung cancer cases in people who have never smoked is increasing. The disease is different from lung cancer caused by smoking, so what causes it? And this one goes into a lot more scientific details, right? Aside from lung anatomy and environmental exposures, at least part of the answer may lie in genetic mutations that are more common in women, especially Asian women. So this thing comes up, you could see they're talking about the same thing, right? Especially they're seeing this in Asian women, like the woman they talked about in the last article. Now they say one of the most prevalent is a mutation known as EGFR. Do I know what EGFR is? No, I'm not going to pretend to, right? But that doesn't mean we can't talk about this. They say that the lung cancers in people who never smoked, it usually is due to a number of mutations that could be causing the cancer, according to this doctor. So-called driver mutations, they call it, right? So EGFR is a gene which codes for a protein on the surface of cells. It's called epidermal growth factor receptors. And that may explain why women, especially Asian women, have this, but it's, as they say, it's not entirely understood. There's some evidence that female hormones may play a role with certain genetic variants that affect estrogen metabolism. That's more prevalent in East Asians, so on and so forth. So they're going to go into the specific scientific stuff, which I'm sure there's a lot of information about. I'm not dismissing it. Hey, I'm obviously not a specialist in this. But I can say this with confidence. Even though I know a virologist or a biologist, epidemiologist is going to hear me and say, scoff at what I'm about to say and say, psh, he's conflating two completely separate things. These are different things. He doesn't know what he's talking about. It's not those kinds of mutations. And it's not that. It's not that. There's a difference between established, tested knowledge. That's one thing. And the other thing is seeing things before they're confirmed, identifying potential relationships, okay, that can be tested, and then we can find out if that's the case. Now, science and medicine is supposed to pursue that. They're supposed to be pursuing these, investigating these potential links. And yeah, there's no established science to say this is the case. Well, that's the point. That's what you want to do that. You want to pursue that. Being open-minded and then investigating where there is smoke to see if there's fire over there, right? But we don't have that today. Today, the scientific community just seems to reference directly back to established knowledge on a few specific things. So they refer back to what is established. And this scientific community, they themselves set the standard for the reviewing and the publishing practices, right? So they decide what makes established knowledge, this peer-reviewed journaling shit, right? You give somebody a study, and then they do a study, and right away they say, oh, this didn't pass all of the procedures, right? This didn't check all the boxes for how long it was peer-reviewed, for how many scientists confirmed this. Now, this I see as a conflict of interest. That's called the conflict of interest, where the people that are supposed to be doing this, that are in question, they're the same ones setting the guidelines for evaluating what makes them, what makes that information trustworthy. But anyway, my point bringing up genetic mutations is, am I supposed to pretend that vaccines have nothing to do with this when we're talking about genetic mutations? So now we've got mRNA vaccines now, right? Not just for COVID, but the FDA approved it in the avian flu for poultry, right? So we've got that. Not only that, but we have viral delivery systems for gene therapies. This is all recent. And more about that later. So there's a progression here, because I'm going to go back to it. But on top of all that, not just mRNA, there's plenty of research about that, but the chemicals themselves. The toxic chemicals are known to cause DNA mutations. They're known. Like when they look at these lung cancers. If the stuff in cigarettes can cause genetic mutations, and it does, formaldehyde, I don't know, all the other ones that are in there. So if formaldehyde can do that, and the cigarette chemicals, then is mercury, aluminum, and thimerosal, they wouldn't cause that? Of course they would. Now, I'm not going to prove it to you about this stuff, these contaminants and toxic chemicals causing genetic mutations, because I don't have the ability to run a clinical trial. The people who do have that ability, they're cooking the fucking books. They're cooking the books. I'm just going to say it like it is. This is why I can't be in scientific debates with doctors, and because I just don't have the patience for it. I know they're cooking the fucking books, meaning they're playing statistical games and changing up procedures all the time to get these clinical trials to look a certain way, to get the studies to give a certain answer. They're twisting the procedures to get the opposite answer of what the truth would show. I saw this video, the deposition of Stanley Plotkin, alright, this vaccine. I don't want to misrepresent his qualifications. The point is, this is the guy that's done a lot of work on vaccines and all this, and he's made a lot of money from it. And they point out many things, I'm going to link this thing. 18 months, they would track the efficacy of it for 18 months. So they would go back 18 months later to see if this vaccine they were testing was effective, right? But when it came to tracking safety, they did 4 days. 4 days or 48 hours to see if there were any negative effects, all that, 4 days, right? And then nothing after that. But a year and a half later, they're still testing for efficacy. Because clearly, it's in their interest to downplay any safety risks and then make sure that it's just like if you're taking fucking pictures for a dating app. You're going to show your good side, right? You're not going to show a freaking mugshot, right? That's the thing. You're deciding what is shown in that frame. And that's what they do. They cook the fucking books. So they asked this guy, Dr. Stanley Plotkin, is that enough? That's all you do, 4 days for safety? And he says, I'm sure they followed up. I'm sure they don't just leave it at that. He almost says, I'll guarantee. I think he said he guarantees it. Just just like believing and thinking that these companies who are paying for the trials, right? I'm sure they would do that. I'm positive they would do that. And I think it's a joke. It's a joke. Why would they do that? Why would they do something against their interests? Now I'm going to go back to this article and just continue and respond to some things. As the proportion of lung cancer in never smokers increases, experts say it's crucial to develop prevention strategies for this population. A number of risk factors have been implicated. For example, studies have revealed that radon and secondhand smoke can elevate the risk of lung cancer in non-smokers. So they're giving different reasons for why the cancers might be up. But if they're saying secondhand smoke, there's no reason to believe we have more secondhand smoke than we did years ago. So that doesn't make sense. They say additionally, exposure to cooking fumes or to stoves burning wood or coal in poorly ventilated rooms may also increase the risk. Well, again, that doesn't apply. That doesn't make sense because home ventilation methods have gotten better, not worse. So also, people are using microwaves more than stoves anyway. Now, microwaves and radiation, maybe that's something to talk about, topic for another episode, right? But they give you two reasons which don't apply. Third reason they give you: since women traditionally spend more time indoors, they are particularly vulnerable to this type of indoor air pollution. And this one I really have a problem with because actually women do not spend more time indoors anymore. Maybe they used to. But women go to work and the gym and anywhere. Women go anywhere. They spend time anywhere but a kitchen. And I know what that sounds like. I'm not like being funny, really. I'm not the one saying that women have to live a certain way. I'm not saying women have to do anything but whatever the hell they want to do, right? I'm just pointing out facts. Women are not spending as much time by those stoves. For sure. For sure. So they're saying, okay, they're getting more of this indoor air pollution. You're assuming that. I think they're getting more outdoor air pollution because they're spending a lot more time outdoors. Women are spending a lot more time outdoors and traveling, and not just by car, but by bike, by public transit, all of this stuff, right? I believe the woman they talked about in the New York Times article was in New York, right? So we're talking about air pollution. That's what we're talking about here. Outdoor, not indoor. Last point. However, outdoor air pollution is an even more significant factor in the development of lung cancer. Okay, agreed. They did say it, right? So that's the point for me. It's outdoor air pollution. And they give this picture. You could see from this picture that they're taking it in a certain direction. Now, the BBC article is going to take the unregulated industrial pollution angle. And you can tell by what they're wearing, especially in the Middle East and Asia. That's what they're talking about. These countries where we know they have polluted air, right? From just dirty, from outdated cleanliness practices. And that's not where I think it's coming from. I'm sure they got their lung cancers there too, but these lung cancers, this surge of them, for sure this is happening here in the United States and in Europe. So they're saying one thing, but they're really they're leading you towards a different conclusion. But we're going to read some more anyway. They talk more about this. In fact, outdoor air pollution is the second leading cause of all lung cancer cases after smoking. Right? So smoking is number one, and then outdoor air pollution is number two. It makes sense. Studies have revealed that those who live in highly polluted areas are more likely to die of lung cancer than those who do not. Okay, makes sense. And they talk about particulate matter, typically found in vehicle exhaust and fossil fuel smoke, seems to play an important role. And then after this, look at this fucking quote they threw in. At least one study has shown an association between wildfire exposure and an increased incidence in lung cancer, quote by Christine Berg. Now this wildfire stuff, here in Chicago, where I'm from, we have had 2 or 3 occasions now where we had this wildfire smoke, big cloud, allegedly from Canada, allegedly traveled and settled over this area, over the entire city of Chicago for several days. I did an episode about it then. I talked about it with Vinny Eastwood also as well. And cheers to my friend Vinny Eastwood, who I just sent a message. I hope he messages me back. So maybe let's say it was the smoke just like they said it was, right? No conspiracy, everything is just as they say. I haven't caught the government red-handed here or anything, but the reason I'm not going to let it go is I can see that the wildfire smoke point, that talking point, it's a way to normalize it. To normalize that you can get unbreathable air out there, and at the same time, using that talking point, no matter what the origin of it truly is, using that talking point to push for more government power, like the Agenda 21 AI technocracy type of power, which the environmental movement has always worked to implement. The environmental movement has always been working toward less control, less free control over resources by the people, and more control of resources by the state. And by environmental movement, I'm not talking about like Rachel Carson's Silent Spring environmentalists. I'm talking about the United Nations, smart growth, sustainable development, land use, that type of stuff, that type of environmental movement. So I'm just going to say it plainly. They say it's exhaust smoke, they say it's smoke from the fires. Well, I don't see any black mist in the air. I don't smell any smoke in the air when this stuff sets over the city. I don't see any red or yellow tint like in these pictures. But in Chicago, you do get plenty of days where there's just a fucking fog over the city. I know fog happens. I know water does that. But it's cloudy white. It's just like the so-called clouds in the sky. That's what I'm thinking. So, forgive me if I'm skeptical. I know that's real unscientific, right? I'm sure MIT is preparing to mail me my tinfoil hat as we speak. But whatever. That's what fucking makes sense to me. So I'm going to tell you what I think makes sense. And no, I can't run a clinical trial to make my point. Now, this next article, if it wasn't getting on my nerves enough, fearing coverage could change, some parents rush to vaccinate their kids. That's the article. This is July 25th. All recent, right? For 2 decades, Washington, D.C. pediatrician, her name Lanre Falusi, has counseled parents about vaccine safety, side effects, and timing. But this year, she said, the conversations have changed. For the first time, I'm having parents of newborns ask me if their baby will still be able to get vaccines, Falusi said. So there's your key here. Still be able to. Whenever somebody wants you to make a bad decision, they're going to stress that it'll be gone soon. Like that it'll be run out soon. Like buy now, supply limited, limited time offer. No matter what it is, that whenever you get the idea that something is about to run out or maybe it won't be available, that's when you get people rushing to the stores to buy toilet paper like happened 5 years ago. So manipulators are what I want to do this. They introduced the concept of lack because it works on our human fear of abandonment and exclusion, which we have as human beings. Furthermore, this is one of the many things that has occurred due to the second Trump presidency. And I called this happening. And with RFK as well. I'm not sure, honestly, many people have talked about this. But and if they have, it's worth mentioning anyway, that this urban and suburban American majority, right, which is leftist or centrist, the status quo we're talking about, right? At least the left-leaning status quo. Which is most of the academic communities, most of the middle class, that's what it is. Now these people, which is really a majority, they've had an existential fear triggered within them due to the Trump government and the Trump administration. They're feeling the same way right now as you would feel, if you thought your child was about to run out of food, like they might not have food tomorrow. That's the way they see vaccines. That's the way a whole lot of people see the medical community, that like we're going to go back to the dark ages if this is gone, right? Back to the article. Throughout the U.S., pediatricians say that anxious parents are concerned about access to routine childhood immunizations. Exactly what I said. It's anxiety. It's just like food insecurity, right? That's especially true for those with children covered by Medicaid, the government insurance program for low-income families. Medicaid covers 4 in 10 children in the United States. Now this person, Deborah Greenhouse, a pediatrician in South Carolina, she says it really became an issue when RFK Jr. stepped into the role of HHS secretary. And I mentioned this before. It's just another indication, it's just another explanation of why RFK was allowed to get in the first place. Because The fact that he's done far more work about vaccines, he's made the documentary, and because of his presence there now, his work that he's done in the past, and then the current statements he's making now, this mobilizes all these people to double down, to connect even more deeply with the scientific and medical systems. The doctors, the universities, the drugs, the insurance, all of that. They will trust it even more because they think this threat is coming to take that away from them. And then the article says the concern accelerated after the shakeup of a key Centers of Disease Control and Prevention vaccine advisory body in June, raising fears that millions of American families could soon have to pay out of pocket for shots now covered by their health insurance. And that's the point here. Raising fears. They say raising fears. That's what the point of it. Now, if vaccines are really going to stop being covered by insurance, they may make some things out of pocket, but not to any significant degree, because the insurance companies and drug companies and government, they're not going to step on each other's toes. That's a real, very delicate ecosystem there. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to shake that up. Plenty of people think that an old man can just come in and start changing all of that around. I think you are a bunch of fools if you believe that. He wouldn't stand a chance. You're not walking in and going to change around all those long partnerships and contracts and entanglements that you don't even know. It would take years for you to even figure it all out. So please get this fantasy out of your mind that politicians are going to be coming in and making significant changes to established systems, because they're not. You might be able to take the transgenders out of college sports, yeah, but you ain't touching shit, Bobby, when it comes to insurance, pharma, and government deals. He's not touching it. And neither is Trump. Donnie and Bobby are not touching shit when it comes to big money like that. And it's not even about money. It's about entire systems of market control. Like, we're talking about making markets. So we're not talking about somebody who's made a couple billions even in real estate. We're talking about the market, the future of the real estate market. There's levels to this shit, as they say. Now let's finish up with this article. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a longtime anti-vaccine activist, removed all 17 members of the CDC's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, or ACIP. Now, the ACIP is the panel responsible for recommending which shots are included in the nation's adult and childhood immunization schedules. Kennedy replaced these panelists with new members aligned with his views, prompting alarm among medical professionals and public health experts. So he reshuffled people, just like the cabinet changes and all of these appointees to all of the organizations change with the president, right? But that's exactly my point here. So he gets his people in. They get their people in. But what does it matter what people they get in if these people all have the same length leash? They're paid by the same people. So who cares what they are? It's just like the politicians who get voted in. They're still getting funded by the same organizations. Now these bureaucrats that get appointed, not voted in, they're still paid and sponsored by the same type of organizations. So I think that's enough about that. I hope I've made myself clear on this. That's an easy one right there, right? Now I believe this is the last article we're going to look at. 2 boys died after a gene therapy, but this family won't give up hope, on a Washington Post article. Now this is July 26th, so this is very recent, yesterday now. By the way, I didn't even mention what date it is and what episode it is, but that's fine. That's good. And this whole article, I'm not going to read through this because at the end of the day, we're talking about sick children here in this article. And I find it honestly distasteful for me to read their story and bang and just shoot back at this article step by step and talk about all the ideas and all the interests and agendas at play here. But I am going to talk about it some. But I just wanted to say that. So I'm going to summarize it generally. In short, 2 teenage boys have died during a clinical trial for a gene therapy. Now, these boys both received a gene therapy from Sarepta Therapeutics. Now, why are they taking an unproven gene therapy and being tested on? Well, it's because they both had Duchenne muscular dystrophy. So it's this incurable disease where they progressively lose control over their muscles, so they can't walk, and the median life expectancy is like 28 years old, right? So they don't have a normal life and they don't live for very long. It's very tragic all around. But two of them died after receiving this treatment. So the clinical trial has been paused. All the drug shipments have been called off. The stock plummeted, right? All this stuff crashed down. Now, Friday night, the FDA announced that it was investigating a third death. So we've got 3 deaths now, right? I caught in this article that Roche, Roche, I don't know how you say it, it's Roche. I want to make sure I don't gloss over that one, because this is one of these fucking evil companies. They sell this therapy overseas, and they stated that the physician treating the boy in Brazil, he assists the death as unrelated to the drug. So this third death, Roche Pharmaceuticals, is quick to tell you that, hey, the doctor said it had nothing to do with us. And Roche, the pieces of shit scumbags. This is one of those multinational mega companies. This is who I'm talking about. But I wonder what it was, the cause of death, because we don't know. But I would bet that it's liver failure, because we know one of those other boys died of liver failure. And although it's not proven, we know what happened, because the virus used to transport the gene therapy into the muscle cells is likely to have triggered an immune response in the liver, Sarepta has said. They've said that, causing inflammation that led to liver failure. So Sarepta admitted to it, right? It's a virus used to transport the gene therapy into muscle cells. That's how it works. So you got a gene therapy, but that doesn't work. You can't just, it's not that simple. So they use a virus to get the virus to infect the cells, and that's how they get their genetic therapy in. And that rung an ominous bell to me when I read that, because that sounds like SARS-CoV-2 vaccine, aka COVID jab, aka whatever euphemisms you want to use. I'm not gonna censor myself. I'm talking about vaccines. I'm not pretending that I'm not talking about them. And these piece of shit scumbags, they get to tell you what medicine is, and I can't tell you, right? Because I'm not qualified, because I haven't done the trials, right? So that shit just pisses me right off. But I point that out as we keep in mind. We just talked about lung cancers and genetic mutations, right? So now we also think about this viral pathway gene therapy. It seems to be like, there may be something to that, to those things being connected. Not accepting, or I'm not saying to accept or reject anything offhand, but just looking out for connections that are not yet made. So keep it in mind as we talk about genetic mutation. Now, this is the opposite of genetic mutation. They're trying to do gene therapy, right? So they are trying to change the body's genetic makeup for a different, so it's different, right? It's intentional. But something to think about how they do this. One happens, happens through a virus. The other one through some particulates. Don't want to say too much there, right? Because I'm going to keep it reasonable, but it's something to think about. But I did read this. The FDA approved Sarepta's gene therapy for Duchenne and later expanded it, despite clinical trials that failed to meet their main functional goal and concerns about the agency's own reviewers about its effectiveness. The extremely costly drug has been approved by the FDA since 2023. Andrew is part of a clinical trial testing the drug for a subset of patients who are unable to walk. Andrew is one of the boys that are the subject of this article. One of these is $3.2 million a dose. So this is one of these doses that costs, millions of dollars for one. And thus, the drug has brought in more than $1 billion revenue in just over a year. Okay. Now, one of these is called Elevidys. Elevidys is the name of the treatment. And Elevidys' path to FDA approval was contentious, the article says. In its first major randomized clinical trial, the therapy failed to show that the boys who received it performed better on a battery of physical tests than those who got a placebo. In other words, their shit didn't work. It just doesn't, this is what happens in the fucking science pharma world. It didn't do shit. In the first trial, Now, it was still approved. I'm sure in the second trial, if that happened, maybe this was the second trial, but I'm sure the second trial it did better, right? You know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? Because in the second trial, I'm sure they made the placebo not really a placebo, like they do with a lot of the vaccine clinical trials. And this is another thing with about the Stanley Plotkin deposition, or you heard some of this stuff. And so cheers to my friend who told me this. By the way, you're invited to Soundpath. I better see you there. But my friend told me this, pointed me to this vaccine thing, and that was before I even got sick. So whatever. Now, I know I made this article sound like the article's criticizing the company. It's not. It's actually like the article's more lamenting the FDA's regulations. It's saying that the family won't be able to try these experimental treatments to save their boy, right? Because the clinical trial was stopped. So really, the article is more like that. And this is a very common tactic in medical rhetoric. When it comes to light, whenever it happens that some medication is causing harm, right away what you get is these very emotional arguments, like visceral reactions right away. It's almost as if the writer of this article wanted to drag these fucking poor boys over in front of your face, put them right up to you and say, look at him. You want to take away the medicine? You want to take away his chance for life? You want to take that away from him with your, with all the shit you talk about, informed consent and safety? That's what it seems like to me. There's all this emotional arguments when I'm talking about like safety. I'm trying to make sure anyway, let's let that go, right? I don't want to get off track. So the answer is no. The answer is no. I don't think anybody should be even stopped from taking any drug, right? So just to restate my position, anyone should be able to take anything, experimental or otherwise. So while I do want to stop government and corporations from polluting the air and stop these companies from selling these toxic drugs and marketing them as safe, and I want to stop other unsafe things that are being, dispensed on a mass level, I want to stop all that. But I don't want to do it through regulation, because the only correct and truly long-lasting way to do that would be through an informed populace. Now, that's the only protection we got. Is us, is like what we know. We can't rely on the nutrition facts on the back of the bottle or the freaking government's inspections to see if something is fit for our consumption. All we have is our own intelligence, our own level of information. But as an immediate stopgap solution, there's still one. I have one too. Why doesn't the FDA have a section that's recognized as unsafe but still available on the market, so you don't go to jail if you get it? It would be a thing where that's like use at your own risk. Why couldn't they do that? They do that with a whole bunch of other shit, but not medication, not food. Why do they have a control over food and drugs? Because again, this is why I'm doing an episode about health, because health is very important in the control of people. It overlaps with the control of resources. So they could do that. They could give the appropriate waivers and the appropriate, liability, waivers of liability. But of course that won't happen, right? The FDA ain't going nowhere, and they're gonna do things this way because the system is fucking crooked. And the FDA does not exist to be a check and balance and to be a watchdog over the predatory drug companies. No, they exist to shut down the competitors of these predatory drug companies. Like, that's who they're really shutting down, especially anything having to do with natural solutions or herbal remedies. The FDA is a watchdog of that. They're not watching the big drug companies. They pay the big drug companies pay these people, just the same way that they lobby politicians. And there are plenty of books about those overlaps and those conflicts of interest. But as for the author of this article, Daniel Gilbert, or editors, right, whoever's involved, I don't know. But I wouldn't be surprised if this guy got $100,000 payment to write this article, because it's very well done. It's a very emotional article, without being like blatantly sleazy and deceptive. It's a good fucking PR move, because it doesn't present Sarepta as an angel. It doesn't look like he's writing their defense, but has the effect. You can't even tell that that bait and switch is being done here. But I can tell, I guess, and that's why my MIT hat better be double layer tinfoil. You know what I mean? Call me what you want. I'm just saying shit that makes sense. Anyway, my heart goes out to the children and their families. Now, last story is just gonna bring it all full circle, right? Is it art imitating life or life imitating art? The other way around. Right on cue. You've probably heard by now that my voice is not as silky smooth as it usually is. So obviously, I caught a summer cold or something. I got sick. So first of all, on Monday, my stomach was really fucked up, and I couldn't even really work the next day. I just did what I had to. Then I was better on Tuesday, and then on Wednesday afternoon, I got a real sore throat. And I think that this is bad timing because I'm supposed to be rehearsing my music and getting ready for my performance at Soundpath, which more about that. So I get that, and then after that, I got right now I'm in my nose is not as runny, but the coughing stage and like a bit of a temperature. It's a pattern that I already saw this last year. Like, that's the thing. There seems to be a pattern forming now that there's a lot of, they call this a summer surge. I found 2 articles talking about the summer surge of COVID, and that there's a lot more COVID during July and August now. Of course, there are the new variants, right? One is Nimbus, and the Nimbus one, which is supposed to be the most common one today, one of the symptoms is like they call it razor blade throat. It sounds so fucking stupid. Not only the name, but the symptom. It sounds like bad indie wrestling. But I did have like a really painful throat. I was taking a lot of cough drops. The bitches didn't work. I was taking extra strength menthol cough drops, not doing nothing. Then there's another one called Stratus, one of these strains, and the symptom is hoarseness, which includes a scratchy or raspy voice. And I'm thinking, man, like, don't piss me off right now because I got, I'm in the studio tomorrow recording music. I got an album coming out next month. Now, one thing I want to bring up here is because I brought up COVID, right, which I don't even like to talk about. I don't even like to admit that I get sick. I always feel like it's a personal failure on my part, right? Like that I let this stupid shit interrupt my daily processes. But I saw that the past 2 weeks really, are so many rainy days. You look at the weather and you're seeing like chance of rain 6 out of 7 days. And there were a lot of rainy days, but the rain was not easily predictable. Now I know this because I'm looking at the weather every day to see, where to send the painters, if they could do exterior painting tomorrow. Are we going to have an indoor day or an outdoor day? What is the weather? Can we work outside, right? Just for my work. So it really affected planning, and I'm seeing it. And so you'll get chance of rain all day, but they don't know when. So you can't really plan ahead, and it wasn't like this. So obviously I'm not a meteorologist, right? But it's clear that it wasn't easily predictable. But there was all this rain. Now, right around that time, this was Wednesday afternoon. Right around that time, or actually Thursday afternoon. After you get that first anticipated rainfall around 2 p.m., then I started coughing a lot, like in a way that I haven't gotten since I used to smoke a lot of weed, like that type of cough where it's like desperate, And I don't usually get that, so it stood out to me. I'm wondering, like, it must be something in this area. I was like carrying bricks, so I thought maybe I was just out of breath and something irritated my throat, right? I already had sore throat at the time. This was Thursday. I was eating my extra strength menthol cough drops. Didn't help all that much, but as I look back on all of this today, it's leading me to this simple conclusion. I think the most likely culprit for these lung cancers, the summer illnesses, the rare genetic diseases, I'm bunching them all together. Based on what I know today and based on historical knowledge, it's environmental exposure. And they tell you as much. Everything indicates that this is environmental exposure that is causing the way that health is what it is for people today. Now, knowing how badly this international alliance of power wants that climate change narrative to take hold. We know they do. We know these intergovernmental, multinational governing bodies, and all of the foundations and think tanks. They want this shit. They want that climate change narrative. So there's a motive. There's a clear motive for why they would do this. So it's a very grounded and basic assumption on my part, I think, to conclude that the government is being used, sorry, Freudian slip, the environment is being used as a biochemical weapon against the people. The environment is being used as a weapon. I think it's on purpose. So, there you go. The solution to this is we need, so we know that from outside we're getting bombarded with toxic things. Whatever you say the reason for that is, we are. So from the outside, we can protect ourselves to a degree, but we are going to get some kind of toxicity from the outside, even in a perfect world. My solution is what we have from the inside. We need a biochemical antidote, an endogenous medicine. Endogenous meaning from within. Creating our own medicine from within, and that shit is super real. Now that's real. That's not placebo effect, but it is well known that your sense of well-being, your spirit, your thoughts, right? What kind of energy you're sending, what kind of story you're telling yourself, what kind of how you're approaching your environment, what you're creating from within, that can protect you from a lot of these toxins. Now you can achieve that with good people, being around good people, good company, good music, being happy and enjoying life. And all those things you can do at the Soundpath Music Festival, which is August 29th to August 31st. So this is a month from now. And August 31st, there will be a live in-person event at Arnold's in Oaks, Pennsylvania, where I will be performing live. I'm going to tear that shit up. Tickets are available. Buy your tickets. Last time I checked, tickets were like $20. And Derek Bros is going to be there. Joe Murray is going to be there. Brenda Daniel is going to be there. Lady Maverick is going to be there. Now, I'm not confirming for sure that who else is going to be there, but I know I am. And if you're anywhere in this area, let me know. Like, maybe I'll pick you up on the way there. Like, I'm going to drive there. So I'm going to go there, and I got an album that I'm releasing. I'm going to release a big ass album that weekend, like August 30th. I'm going to release it. It's called Soundpath. I'm going to put the cover up. I got like 16, 17 new songs that I'll be performing there, and then I'll have a set on the 30th as well. So thank you to the Soundpath organizers for inviting me to be out there, because I'm going to make the most of that. I'm going to feature a whole lot of stuff, and I got a whole lot to say. And it's really, like putting all the fun aside, this is going to be a special event. You can already feel that it's going to be a special event, even from a month out. A lot of things have come together. It's one of these things where you could just tell. It just feels right. And on that note, yeah, it's all about feeling right. And when you're not feeling right because of what's happening on the outside, then you got to feel right from the inside. But at the end of the day, we need to be affecting environment and creating change and making a better future to make that environment healthy, where it's about changing the world, not escaping from the world to go within us where it's safe. No, I want safety out in the world. And no, it's never going to be safe. It's never going to be a bubble. Yeah, just a reminder as we finish up episode 138. Like, stick to your principles, From the first episode, I was talking shit about the government and all of this stuff that was clearly in the news, and I know it's clearly a lie. And even though I know all of the news is bullshit, I know it's a waste of time, I still want to be there. I don't want to let go. It's the type of a thing where you got a fever, where you got your nose running and all of that. You don't let go. You don't stop what you're doing and just withdraw, right? You go there, you stand and deliver. That's my message to everybody. Thank you so much. See you next week on This Week in Tyranny.
Stuck in my ways, foundation in a spot, but still so out of place. Foundations, foundation, foundations, foundation. It's all lost, but now without a trace. Foundations, holding on. Stuck in my ways, foundations in a spot, but still so out of place. Foundations, foundation.